Welcome back to the Metal Exchange. Justin and Chris back again. This one is a long time coming. We go back to June 30th, 1986, as we cover Savatage's third studio album, Fight for the Rock. This is going to be an interesting one. But before we talk about all things Savatage, how are you, my friend?
I'm good. I think I had always assumed this would be the last Savatage album that we would cover, but I feel like I think you had suggested that maybe we just dive into this one and save the last of the heavy hitter albums like Mountain King and Wake of Magellan later on. So that's I tended to agree with you on that. So we'll hang on that. So we still have those two albums and Sirens and Power of the Night to discuss and Poets and Madmen as well. So plenty of time to get to that, and hopefully there'll be one more Savatage album to talk about at some point. So it seems like John Oliva has been in better shape. He's been attending some of the TSO shows. I've seen fans post pictures of him with him at the soundboard. So that's great to hear. I think there was also some rumors circulating that he might join the band in 2026 for some of their shows. So that's good news. I guess I will I'll segue to you in related discussion. You saw Trans-Siberian Orchestra yourself, not but just a couple of days ago. So do you want to talk about that experience?
Yeah, I hadn't seen this band live in well over a decade. And I give credit where credit is due. The amount of upgrades they have done, not only over the last decade, but over the last almost 30 years, is unbelievable. I remember seeing them at the Beacon Theater well over 25 years ago and thinking to myself, that was a really good show. But the production quality and the stage show and the lighting and some of the special effects that they do are really, really, really top notch. And so that in and of itself was enjoyable. It was also enjoyable because it was my kids' first concert, their first time seeing live music, and they had a really good time. My mom had a really good time. She was gushing over the show. And my dad, who's probably the biggest skeptic of them all, was even able to say those singers could sing. I don't know that he was going to say much about Chris Caffrey or anything like that, although he does like rock music. But he really loved, I think, some of the vocalists. And I have to say, it was a great show for several reasons. Number one, I thought the set list was very good. Not perfect. Maybe a couple of songs that I would have liked to have heard that they left out, but by and large, a really good set list. They also added a song which I was completely not expecting. And I don't know if they did it because it was New York and because Savatage has obviously roots here with Chris Caffrey being from New York and things like that. I can't say exactly why or what happened.
Because you were there.
But, I mean, you got to believe in something, right? All of a sudden, the band comes out, and for no apparent reason at all, they covered Believe by Savatage, which is one of the greatest songs ever written, and I just wasn't expecting it because it hadn't been on any of the prior set lists. So that was a plus. What I found interesting was that the other Savatage song they did, other than Christmas Eve, was Sleep, which is a beautiful ballad that ends Edge of Thorns. What was interesting is that the lovely Kelsey Watts sang the song, but Zach Stevens was in the room. So that was a little bit weird because I'm thinking like that he's now listening to somebody else sing his song. But in fairness, Zach Stevens couldn't do the West Coast tour. And so I'm thinking maybe that had something to do with it, rather than having him do just the East Coast and somebody else do another rendition out West. But all in all, nitpicking aside, great show. It was great to see them again. And it kind of served as a nice bookend to this week where I was listening to Fight for the Rock for the better part of the week, which was a completely different experience altogether.
Yeah, better is a is a word, I guess. I don't listen, I'm excited to dig into this album just because I feel like I don't know that I think I said to you, this is the most I've ever listened to this album. Or no, in fact, what I said was I've listened to this album more times in the last 2 weeks than I have in the history of owning the album and I've owned this CD since I was in high school, and we'll get to that. But before we dig into that, and did you listen to anything new this week? Are you focusing like me on just getting your list together? That's what I've been doing for the most part. Although there have been some interesting singles that have dropped, but I'm curious if anything's come across your desk this late in the season.
I have had my top 50 list in some semblance of an order for a while, and I have all the stuff that kind of just missed the cut. And I'm really going back and doing a deep dive into everything to just shape the list, make sure that nothing is missing, etc. And it's interesting because there was 1 or 2 albums where I listened to it and I went back, and with the benefit of time, I didn't care for it as much as I did the first time. So I'm still making tweaks to the list. I'm seeing stuff that maybe I didn't pay as much attention to that I should have paid attention to. So I'm not nearly done. But I did have a chance to listen to the new Amorphous single, which came out of the blue. It's called Crowned in Crimson. And this is apparently a song taken from a movie that's set to be due out next month called Son of Revenge, the story of Kalevala. I don't know anything about the project. I just know that when there's a new Amorphous song, I listen to it. And it was really good, which is not surprising because they've been consistently good for like 25 years now with everything they do. But this was a really top-notch song, and I think it is I don't know how it plays into the project, but this is certainly something that people should listen to. And then, of course, the other, I guess, big news is another Megadeth single dropped.
Oh, I missed that.
I have not had a chance to listen to it, but I'm curious just because Megadeth is a very polarizing band. I think that if you ask some people, it's like asked and answered, been there, done that. I don't care anymore. Let them go off to the next wave of their retirement tour. But then if you ask other people, it's the greatest thing they've ever heard. The song is called Let There Be Shred. I think it's an apt title. I thought it was a pretty good song, maybe the best of the singles that I've heard so far, although admittedly I don't know that it was I need to hear the album in its entirety before I draw any conclusions. But the riffs are really good on this one. And then the other song that I had spent some time with was the new Eye of Melian single called Symphonia Arcana. I think we had talked about them briefly at some point on the podcast in the sense that there's the connection with Delane and the whole Timo Somers, piece. This is an album I'm really much looking forward to. This new single gave me heavy Leaves' Eyes vibes, a little bit different than the Delane stuff, but still very intriguing. And I look forward to hearing this album Q1 of next year. Nice.
I actually have that song pegged for my first playlist of 2026. And the previous single, Blackthorn Winter, is on my last playlist of 2025. So I missed their first album completely. So I'm definitely going to be curious about the second release that's coming out next year. Circling back to Megadeth, did you happen to see the trailer for the they're kind of doing like a release party sort of movie, so to speak, where like you go to the movie theater and you'll get to see like this kind of mini doc of the making of the album, and then you'll get to hear the entire album in its entirety. And I'm not sure if it's in advance of the album's release, so it might be a way to hear the album ahead of schedule. But I watched the trailer courtesy of our mutual friend Mike, who sent it over, and it looks really interesting. It's funny because I went and saw the Taylor Swift similar release movie for her most recent album with my girlfriend, and it was cool how they did it. It was like, they made lyric videos for all of the songs on the album, so you actually had some sort of visual component while you were listening to the entire album, but in between each song you had Taylor Swift basically explaining how the songs were written and all that, and I think it's like a really cool way to enjoy an album. And there's not a ton of metal bands, I feel like, that have the cachet to do something like that the way that Megadeth does. So I don't know. I feel like that'd be kind of an interesting thing to see. So, and with all the talk about this being the final Megadeth album, again, I'll believe that when I see it. I think there's going to be a lot of just a lot of chatter about this one. So I have to give this third single a listen. I just added it to my list, but yeah, it's a lot of interesting things coming forward with the band, and I assume this final tour is probably going to go on for a while. Couple of things I just wanted to mention. It was funny. I saw that there was a new single from the band, Power Paladin. They have an album. I think they have an album coming out sometime next year. But this is a band I've never been super familiar with. They're a power metal band from Iceland. They have one album called With the Magic of Windfire Steel. So with that title, I'm sure you can kind of get an idea of what to expect. Next year,
prog band, right?
Yeah, exactly. Black metal. They do have a second album coming out in March of next year called Beyond the Reach of Enchantment. And they released one of the singles, Sword Vigor, which is the most important kind of vigor one can have is sword vigor. So I want to make sure that's make sure your blade is made of Cremerian steel. But I had kind of forgotten that they're on this lineup for the festival in Norway that PowerQuest is going to do their reunion show, along with Twilight Force and the Legend of Valley Doom, and I think Dragony make up the rest of that lineup. And so I gave that a listen, and it was definitely, my style of power metal. And not to be outdone, Dragony released a single as well called Shadow and Flame.
Does your girlfriend know what she's in for with this festival? I mean, there's music festivals, and then you have diverse lineups like 70,000 Tons and Prog Power, which has been expanding their palette. But this is like a straight-up power metal festival that you're traveling halfway around the world to. And I don't blame you at all, but does your girlfriend know what she's in for?
I think it's safe to say that she's not going to actually be attending with me. So, I mean, I would be for what these tickets cost, I would be happy to buy her one if she was interested in going. I told her, I said, even if you want to just come and watch Power Quest with me and then leave, I will buy you a ticket. I would be happy to have you there, but I don't know that she's I don't know if she has the mental preparation necessary to handle this kind of ask, but who knows, stranger things have happened, I suppose. So but yeah, I wanted to mention just those two power metal bands. Dragony recently added a official female vocalist as part of their lineup, Maria Nesh, who is also the singer for Red Eye Temple. She is actually a Russian vocalist, and the band Dragony is out of Austria. So I've always enjoyed their music over the years, so I'm kind of excited to see them. I don't know that they're the sort of band that we would ever really get to see in the U.S. without the help of Prog Power or 70,000 Tons. But I'm excited to see them as well. So I definitely recommend checking out those two singles. Also, the Dragony single features Brittany from why am I forgetting the name of the band from Canada?
Unleash the Archers.
Thank you, Unleash the Archers. I don't think I would have ever come up with that. Don't ask me why. So yeah, I wanted to mention those two. And real quick, I've been on the Within Temptation mailing list for years, and I just found out that they re-recorded Ice Queen, the classic song from 25 years ago from the Mother Earth album, but they did an acoustic version of it, which is really, really cool and well done. I highly recommend you check that out as well.
Beautiful. Lots of stuff to look forward to. Can't wait to get a full report from you about this festival if you're able to attend next year. I know that we've done episodes in the past where I kind of give you the whole breakdown of 70K and stuff like that, and obviously Prague Power. But we have to do an episode dedicated to this festival if you're able to go next year, because I don't know that I'm going to be there. Haven't ruled it out. But I think there's a good chance you find your way there.
We need to have a discussion with the Metal Exchange accountant and see if we could start getting these things tax deductible, because it's part of our job and all, so it should be written off as a job expense, right?
I know all about it. That's the only reason I'm able to do all these wonderful things. No, kidding aside,
Patrick Celsus, we're looking at you.
The Metal Exchange accountant. I want to pivot to Fight for the Rock. Now, I'm not going to belabor the details. We're obviously going to hit all of these albums at some point. I think we should also hit things like Dr. Butcher and the rest of the TSO catalog, of which, I think is an interesting discussion. But for the better part of 27, 28 years, this is an album that we were familiar with, that you owned, that I have, and yet I don't think we've ever talked about it. And to your point from earlier, I listened to this album more this week than I did in the last 30 years. That is not a joke. I probably listened to this album 3 or 4 times in my life. And this week I listened to it at least a half dozen times. I will start.
You look like you're at a loss for words. It's kind of funny.
I don't even know what to say other than there's a reason that the band and fans have called this Fight for the Nightmare. This was an effort by the label in 1986 to have the band pivot and do something different. And quite frankly, I think try to catch fire when heavy metal and radio-friendly hard rock was becoming all the rage. But the flip side is John Oliva, as great of a songwriter as he is, and as much as certain bands like the Beatles clearly influenced him, and he's said as much in interviews and just with conversations that I've had with him, the fact of the matter is this album was an amalgamation of bad ideas and some elements of wonderful songwriting that gets completely buried underneath the sweet production that the label was trying to put forth. And I think it was a complete clusterfuck, even though there's stuff on this album that is brilliant. And that's why I'm so excited to talk about it, because I have so many thoughts. We'll get there. Let's start at the beginning. How and why did you pick this album up in high school?
Just honestly, for the sake of completing the collection. My memory serves as this. This is because Savatage was such a huge, band for me. They were really my first love in metal. I remember the order of the albums that I got them in and all that. And so, as has been discussed in the past, Handful of Rain was the first album that I owned, followed by Gutter Ballet. And that was because Chance and Gutter Ballet were on that mixtape that Ralph had made. I followed that up with Streets, I believe, was the next album that I purchased. I remember getting that one for Christmas along with Images and Words. That was a very good Christmas. After that, I believe came Dead Winter Dead, Edge of Thorns, Hall of the Mountain King in some form or fashion. Then Wake of Magellan, I remember getting when it was finally released in the US. And so really that left that beginning of the catalog that I didn't have anything from. And Ralph had sold me his copy of The Dungeons Are Calling, which was an EP that the band released between Sirens and Power of the Night. He didn't really listen to it or like it or whatever. So he sold it to me for $8 or whatever. So at that point I'm down. I need 3 more albums. And then I believe my aunt would take me to the mall on Christmas and my birthday and just like let me pick out a bunch of CDs and she would just buy them for me and then wrap them and give them to me on Christmas and my birthday, which was great. I think this was Christmas, and I remember grabbing Fight for the Rock and Power of the Night, and because you could buy them at and it was at Sam Goody at the mall, and then I believe our friend Ryan he completed my collection by getting me Sirens for my birthday. So,
did you know what this was, or that it was like universally panned by many before you got it, or was it just like the collector in you is like, it's a void, so I need to have it?
No, I was obsessively scouring the internet for information about this band, even in the early ages of the internet, and so I was aware that this was considered a low point, I guess, or the low point in the band's history. But I'm glad that you asked. You kind of set me up perfectly for this, because I remember at the time at that Sam Goody talking to Charlie, who we've talked about before, Charlie Selecchia, who worked at Sam Goody, and we kind of became, I don't know if I'd say friends, but like, we would go in there and talk to him because he had seen us looking at metal albums, and we started talking, and turns out all these years later he's a good friend of our friend Charles, and so like all things come full circle. But I remember Charlie saying to me like, it's not that bad. Like I remember him like holding the disc in his hand and just being like, it's not that bad. And I thought, what better thing to do than to actually reach out to Charlie and ask him what his memories were about this album. And I told him, I said, I remember you telling me this album is not that bad. So I was like, I feel like I have to get your thoughts all these years later on Fight for the Rock. And so I reached out to him, and he provided us with a little blurb. And I haven't told you about any of this. I thought it would be a fun little surprise. So he says, I remember when I was going back and discovering all of Savatage's back catalog, coming across Fight for the Rock and thinking to myself, well, this is different. After getting to know the guys, it was clear that John had no love lost for the album, referring to it as a nightmare. And while I can certainly understand and respect having such disdain for a project you worked on that leaves a bad taste in your mouth, looking back, it is clearly a product of the times. 1986 is an interesting year for heavy metal, where you really see so much change happening, a discussion for another time perhaps, and Fight for the Rock fits right in with that context. Looking back, I still have a fondness for the album, while recognizing that I am in the minority when it comes to that view. It certainly is not my favorite of Savatage's albums, but it is not the worst piece of music ever released either. And I always remember that this album is almost directly responsible for Paul O'Neill coming into the band's life, so there is a bit of serendipity to its existence. So I was hoping for something nice from Charlie. I think he exceeded the expectations with that write-up, but I thought that just going full circle with that was a perfect way to kind of start off the episode. And to your point, like, I think the reason that this album is so uneven, to say the least, is because it's like a hodgepodge of things going on. Like, you have two covers, you have songs that the band had already written. One of the tracks was already released on Sirens and was re-recorded for this album. Two of the tracks were recorded as demos during the early days of the band. Some of the songs were written by John Oliva for the sole purpose of being used by other bands on the Atlantic record label that ended up back in Savatage's pile. And I think that's why you find that there's like some really, really good stuff on here mixed in with, I honestly don't think there's anything bad on this album, but there's definitely some like mediocre stuff as far as like Savatage goes. And I had said to you like early on in the process, I was like, a bad Savatage album or the worst Savatage album is still better than a lot of bands' best albums. I don't know that it's a lot of bands, but honestly, but there's some stuff on here that you could really sink your teeth into. And I was surprised at how much I was actually enjoying listening to this the more and more I went back to it. So this has been actually quite pleasant experience.
When you listen to the album and take your knowledge of who created the music out of it, it's actually not a bad listen at all. It's rather enjoyable.
I also think, just to interrupt real quick, I think it could have been made better with, I think, a better order of tracks. But I'll delve into that.
I won't even come. We'll get to the track order. I actually have a better suggestion to make this album better. But no, I shouldn't say a better suggestion. A different.
Put on
suggestion.
Power of the Night.
Yeah, well, there you go. No, kidding aside, I think that if this was released by some other band, I think it would be evaluated differently. But as I've said in the past, bands are sometimes a victim of their own success. That is a problem that Epica has, in my opinion, because they've released such great music consistently throughout the years that it's hard for something that they do to be my album of the year when I've kind of heard that stuff before. Amorphous, previously mentioned, 20 minutes ago. Same thing. Love the new song. Love the album from this year. Spoiler, not my album of the year, just because I've heard things like that time and time again from them. This is different. My suggestion here is not about the songs or the covers, although I do think there's a little bit of a cohesion issue. To me, it's the production. The way they produced this album, and sonically, the way it simply sounds, it lacks punch and it lacks the metal element because they were going for something else. If you remix and remastered this album and you made it a little punchier, a little more bass heavy, I think that you'd actually have a really good album, but it just sounds so sweet, almost NutraSweet, like fake sugar type of stuff. That is my biggest problem. And I try to imagine what it would be like if I didn't have to crank it all the way up, and if I didn't have to turn the bass up and see if it would have made a difference. I don't know, but I would tend to think it would I'd give it a higher rating as a result because, and we'll get into it shortly, there's some really good songs on here. There's other songs where I may not love everything about it, but there's parts of the songs that I love, and it does lack the cohesion that you had mentioned earlier with the track listing. I think that is a valid point.
What do you think about the album cover? Because I feel like you walk into a record store in 1986 and you see this on vinyl, and this big. I think it stands out. I think like you see an album
it stands out, but it doesn't. It doesn't tell you what the album is. In other words, for better or for worse, when you get an Iron Maiden album and you see Eddie on the cover, you know what it is. Same thing with other bands. When you get a Megadeth album cover and you know what Vic Rattlehead is going to be, for better or for worse. When you look at Metallica, and again, I'm just using some of the bigger bands, you kind of have a sense as to what Master of Puppets is with the font and everything else. When you look at this, you see the Savatage logo, and you know what that is. But then you see guys, it's almost like looking at like a World War II plant the flag type of thing. I don't know what is going on here, and it doesn't really tell me anything about the album. Even the colors, the blue and the gray, not really that black that you're used to from Savatage, and it doesn't have the Broadway style that a Gutter Ballet or a Wake of Magellan has. I don't know what's going on here.
Well, it's a recreation of the raising the flag of Iwo Jima photograph, but
that's what I'm saying. That's why I said World War II. But the fact of the matter is, why? What does that have to do with the music?
I
know. I mean, I know it's the planting of the flag. I don't know what it has to do with
because they won the fight for the Rock, and so they're planting their flag in the Rock.
They didn't win anything with this album, and that's the problem.
I thought it won. Anyway. I thought it won a few Grammys. No.
I not in this country. Maybe for you, but I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here. It's actually not that bad of an album. It's just very different. In terms of the band itself, John Oliva on lead guitars and piano, Chris Oliva on guitars and backing vocals, Johnny Lee Middleton joins the band and plays bass on this album, and Steve Dr. Killdrums Wackholz on drums. And I say that,
why do all these Steve's doctors? Like, is there a medical program in that I'm unaware of for metalheads? Like,
let's get Power Quest back on here and ask. I don't know. We have to assume, and I guess the real question is what it was about this album that then brought Paul O'Neill into the fold, because the band would go to catastrophic heights, at least in my eyes, after this. And certainly if you were at the TSO concert that I was at this week, with 15,000 people in the stands, they're doing something right with the music. But this album was certainly not well received by most. It was basically a pop album with some metal flourishes, and then some covers that were really interesting selections in and of themselves. So I think with that backdrop,
I will say one more thing about the album cover. This was something that always drove me nuts, is that the G in Savatage looks like a Q until Streets comes out. And I don't know why, but that bothers me so much. And I was like, it obviously bothered somebody too, because at some point in 1990 or 1991, someone was like, can we add just a little flourish to the bottom of that G so it looks like a G and not a Q? Because, like, I wonder how many people had no idea what was going on, picked up the album and was like, oh, it's the French band Savatage. Like,
it's true. It's a subtle change, because the logo really hasn't changed at all, but for that. But it looks 1,000 times better.
Yeah, so that's a small nitpick. If you'd like to talk about the music, I'd be down for that as well.
The album kicks off with the title track. I think there was a period this week where this was going to be my song of the week. It's not. But the album starts off really solidly. And I think so because it's a little bit of an angrier performance from John, relatively speaking, to the rest of the album. A solid riff, good verses, a pretty decent chorus. There's some questions that I have, like why there's that little keyboard section that kind of just takes you out of it, but a great Chris Oliva guitar solo. And in some ways, with a better mix, I think that this could have easily been on Power of the Night. My biggest knock, I guess, is that marginal chorus, but even that isn't really bad. This is one of the top 2 or 3 songs on the album, and if the rest of the album was like this, I think even the classic Savatage fans would be like, this is a good album. I like the title track. I like the way this album starts. I'm curious if you agree.
I absolutely agree. This is I have 3 songs that are my favorites on this album, and this is one of them. I think I have a guess as to what your song of the week is. We'll see when we get there. But there are things about this album where I hear things from Power of the Night, and I hear things yet to come in Hall of the Mountain King, and then I hear things that the band never goes back and does again. And I'm guessing that Paul O'Neill came in 87 and kind of was like that filter that maybe the band needed that they weren't getting from the record label, who suggested that they put a parental advisory sticker on the album in hopes that it would sell more records. And there's not even any swear words on the album as far as I know, although they're
controversial content. I mean, it's just,
I mean, there's definitely some innuendos, but I mean,
but not overt. I mean, there's albums that did a lot more.
Sure.
And didn't get.
But again, it was like a marketing ploy in so many words to try to get people to buy the album. And oddly enough, the album was on the Billboard chart for 7 weeks peaking at 158. I mean, it wasn't like blowing anyone's doors down, but I mean, it did chart. So I mean, there's that. I just think that this was more of more of a dud as far as like the reviews and how it was received by the media and whatnot, especially after Power of the Night was such a strong release from the band the previous year. But anyway, this just feels like a very anthemic song. I agree 100%. It could have been on Power of the Night with a different mix. but man, it's a really catchy song. I would not be upset if they played this live all these years later, particularly if John was singing it. As far as like these weird keyboards that you find all over this album, I'm wondering if that just has anything to do with the direction of heavy music at that time. I mean, I feel like Van Halen kind of introduced the keyboards on 1984 as like a major driving force in a heavy rock album, and I feel like a lot of bands followed that direction, and so we're only 2 years.
Well, I think of Somewhere in Time by Iron Maiden, and you have all the synthesizers, and that album came out the same year. Something was happening, and Queensryche was doing it too in '86. Like a lot of bands in '86 started toying with this, and I don't know if Van Halen was the catalyst or if it was just a sign of the times. I don't know, but a lot of bands did it around this time.
Yep, absolutely. And so I feel like Savatage was no exception. Not that they didn't use keys on previous albums. I just feel like they tried to make it more of a major part of the sound, or just a more prominent part of the sound. But I agree, like the album starts out great with this song. I mean, you got some great high pitched vocals from John. I think it's a super catchy verses. I agree that the chorus is a little bit redundant and maybe trite, but I honestly, the more and more I listened to it, the more and more I was like really digging it, and I would look forward to putting this album on just because it starts off really well. My biggest issue with the album is what follows, in that it's like three kind of soft songs in a row. One being a cover from Badfinger. And I feel like that's kind of part of the problem, is that like there's more, I don't know. I feel like there's more of the heaviness is reserved to like the back end of the album, or from Edge of Midnight forward. So
it's almost like it felt like a collection of B-sides thrown together than it did an actual cohesive 40-minute album.
Right. And I feel like, after that really strong opening track, I feel like you want to follow up with something. Think about how 24 Hours Ago on Hall of the Mountain King was followed by Beyond the Doors of the Dark. Like you want to like, just, especially I feel like that second track is really important, because you want to prove like, hey, this isn't a one song wonder. Savatage, Gutter Ballet started with Of Rage and War and was followed by Gutter Ballet. So like it's important to follow up with a strong song, and I feel like they might have made a better choice. Out on the Streets was a track that was the last song on Sirens, and it's kind of, I think that the chorus is a little bit less ballady, but the rest of the song feels like a power ballad. And this is like, I feel like this had to be the song that they were like, this is going to be the one that's going to be the radio hit or the single or whatever. And like, I just feel like it took all that momentum from the first track, and then it kind of just slowed things down.
Yeah, it's you have this powerful opener, and then you start hearing wind instruments and acoustic guitars, these kind of semi-bland verses. I actually think the chorus is catchy, but I almost think that if you isolate the track and listen to it as a standalone, it's much better than it is on the album as a whole. It actually reminds me a little bit of Judas Priest's Turbo era, like we talked about, where you had a band that was heavy and raw and known for the leather and the motorcycles, and then all of a sudden they just kind of dialed it down a little bit and was trying to just fit into the times. It's not quite a power ballad, but it lacks that punch of the opener. In some ways, it's almost John Oliva doing his best John Lennon impression, and so it's. And I don't even say that tongue in cheek. I'm serious. It almost has like a heavier Beatles vibe to it. I don't hate the song. It's not Savatage. It's a good song, but it's not Savatage.
I also think for diehard fans, it's like they took a song that was already recorded and they softened it. Like if you listen to the Sirens version, it's got a little bit more teeth to it. It's still, basically the same song, but it definitely has a little bit more of an edge. and it's also the last track on Sirens. Like it makes a little bit more sense, I think, as
it fits better there.
Right. It's an exit song rather than track number 2, where you're looking to maintain momentum from that first really strong title track.
And I also think that, I mean, I could be wrong. I haven't listened to it in a while, but the mix and just the lack of the wind instruments and the chimes and everything, I just think it was better originally. And I think that the vocals are a little more raw and a little more what you expect from John Oliva, a little less saccharine, like I keep saying.
Yeah, agreed. But then they kind of like continue on this road with Crying for Love, which is kind of a retooling, so to speak, of Fighting for Your Love, which was a demo recording that I remember hearing because it was a bonus track on those reissues of Sirens and Dungeons Are Calling. And you know, going back to what I said earlier, Ralph had sold me that CD for like $8. And I remember listening to it, and I always thought that it was the band's second full-length album. It turns out it really wasn't. It was more of an EP. It was recorded the same time as Sirens. It was the same sessions. It was just kind of like what was left over. And when the album and the EP, Sirens and Dungeons Are Calling, were re-released in the 90s, they threw on some bonus tracks, some demos, and on Dungeons Are Calling, and they had the demo Fighting for Your Love and a live version of Sirens. So again, this is another retooling of a song. The demo is way more raw. It sounds like it was recorded in a garage or whatever with an old cassette deck. But it's another song. It opens up with like a kind of a keyboard intro that I think is very Eddie Van Halen esque in ways. It reminds me a little bit of I'll Wait from 1984, just not as punchy. But again, it's like another kind of like kind of saccharine love kind of tune that doesn't have the teeth that you kind of want. And so now you're like left, thinking about that first track, and now we're 3 tracks deep, and we're like, what happened to the balls,
Right. You're exactly right. And again, maybe it goes to your point with the order, but it's this one, instead of starting off with like wind instruments, starts off with a harpsichord type of sound before the riff comes in. And again, it's a good riff, but the mix for me could have made it a lot better riff if it was a little more in your face. This one is kind of a power ballad, and I think the chorus is really catchy, just repetitive. And again, some oddly placed keyboard sounds, but it's not a bad song. The bridge in particular reminds me of things that they would do on future albums, which I found interesting. Not the best Chris Oliva guitar solo. I would say it's a good song, not a great song.
I say like these 2 songs, they don't not belong on the album, but I just think that, again,
spread them out. Yeah, spread them out.
Exactly. But,
maybe the 5th and the 8th track or something.
But part
like
of the problem, I think, is that there's just too many songs that are like this, so that even if you spread them out, it's the album will never actually, it won't pick up any sort of momentum. And so then we follow that up with another power ballad, and I would say
except it's not even their own.
Right.
It's a cover.
And I would argue that it's more ballady than the 2 tracks before it. That said, it's an absolutely fantastic song, originally written by Badfinger. And circling back to your Beatles reference, it was a song that was originally produced by George Harrison.
And it sounds like it. When you listen to this song, this could have been on a Beatles album. And I'll be honest with you, it's a great cover. The acoustic guitar sounds great. The drums sound a little bit weird, not offensive, but just a little bit of a weird mix for the drums. I keep hearing the Beatles with a touch of Elton John thrown in, and it's really well done. To me, this was the bonus track the album needed. This would have been the consummate bonus track at the end of the album. But as the 4th track, after hearing after hearing the title track open this thing up, it doesn't work for me. even though I love the song. It's just it takes the listener out of the experience. And I'll say this: when you listen to Dead Winter Dead, or if you listen to Gutter Ballet or Streets, those albums flow so well. The flow here is off.
Yeah, I mean, part of the problem, I'm fine with leaving the song on the album, bonus track, whatever. It's just that, like, to follow up those two songs that were kind of in that same tempo and kind of almost like emotional kind of vibe. It's starting to get like, okay, now we've had 3 songs in a row that are kind of like love songs that are a little too sweet and not enough heavy. It's a phenomenal song. I remember there was a time in my life where this was legit the only song I knew from this album, because I remember the first time I put the album in, I was like, holy shit, I know this song. And I'll never forget, my mom was like, heard me listening to it, and she like popped her head into the room and was like, who's this? And I'm like, it's Savatage, apparently. She goes, oh, you know, that's a Badfinger song. I'm like, I know, I've heard it on the radio many a times at that point. So this was at one point the highlight of the whole album for me. And now it's kind of like, I just feel like a little bit of a placement change would have done really well for this song, just because following those 2 previous tracks, now we're 4 tracks deep and we're still waiting for the band to rear their teeth again, like they did on Fight for the Rock. I think with The Edge of Midnight, they finally got there.
They do. This song, though, has its own quirks. The beginning with the lasers and like this haunted mansion key sound and the dramatic start, definitely aptly named, but I kept thinking of like Michael Jackson's Thriller, and then I would start laughing to myself. I mean, I'm waiting for like the werewolves to come out. It's kind of a batty tune, but once the intro, that goofy intro is over, you hear a classic Oliva riff, which loses a little bit of something with the keys, but the verses are really good. And it's kind of heavy, melodic, catchy. Not my favorite chorus. I think the keys, again, dilute the music just a little bit. They don't really enhance it. They just kind of dilute it. But that could, again, be a function of the mix. But there are elements of this song which are great. And it's specifically the verses and that riff.
I had to check and make sure that this wasn't like a 1-minute intro, like separate track that was like in between the Day After Day and Edge of Midnight, but it was actually part of the song. If you start the song at like, 50 seconds or whatever, you can bypass.
It's a great,
what sounds like,
and tell me, Oliva
sounds like Star Wars.
Seriously, I'm waiting for the Cantina music and the band to come in, but. And what's also interesting is Oliva's vocals on this track are just completely different from the 3 tracks before it. This is like vintage John Oliva vocals all of a sudden, and it almost sounds like a different singer.
This was my biggest surprise of the whole album. I had forgotten all about this song, and the more and more I listened to it, the more and more I really enjoyed it. It felt like something that could have been on Paul the Mountain King. Maybe I think like Paul O'Neill probably would have added a little bit of his production magic to really take it over the top. But I think this is one of the strongest songs on the album. It was very close to being my song of the week, and it's probably my runner-up as favorite song on the album. I'm so glad we did this. If for no other reason that like I now know that The Edge of Midnight was one of the best songs that the band recorded in their early days. I think it has such a memorable chorus. That eerie keyboard that kind of is playing in the background, it makes it sound almost like it would be a perfect Halloween song.
100% agree with you.
And it just feels like for the first time since Fight for the Rock that we're getting an actual Savatage song.
This could have been on a movie soundtrack in the 80s. For like when you introduce the villain, or the villain is doing something bad, or they're driving fast in their car around Halloween, like you mentioned. I could totally see that. Definitely my second favorite song so far, but that's just the classic Savatage fan in me talking, I think. but not perfect. Again, I think the keyboard's diluted a little bit. We disagree there, but it was definitely an interesting listen, and I like it a lot more than I ever remember. But I still think there's better stuff to come.
Yeah, I would agree. There's not
Now,
enough not enough songs written about Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, particularly Mr. Hyde.
No, and I mentioned Michael Jackson on The Edge of Midnight. I really hear it on Hyde. When you listen to the beginning of this track, it is a dead ringer for Beat It. I mean, it's literally the same thing. It's uncanny. Oh, like blatant plagiarism on behalf of Savatage.
2 songs in a row that really could have just started with the actual song and didn't need the theatrics that make it sound like, you're walking into what was it, that Spirit Halloween store that opens only 1 month out of the year.
Oh, trust me, I see them pop up all over the place. Theatrics aside, the song itself is a little bit heavier. Really, again, those vintage Chris Oliva riffs and verses that I think could have easily been on Hall of the Mountain King. Like, this is not foreign to the Savatage fan. The chorus is a little boring, though, because it just kind of repeats the title over and over again. I love the solo, but then again, I have the bridge here where I don't particularly love the bridge, and so it's kind of a mixed bag. Like, there's parts of this I like, parts of it I don't care for, but it's fine. It's kind of an interesting way to kick off side B.
I remember really not liking this song at one point, and I don't know why, because now I go back to it, I'm like, it's solid. It's not, I don't think it's as good as Edge of Midnight, but it's solid. I agree the chorus is kind of repetitive and silly, but like the rest of the song is pretty solid, and I gotta give credit where credit is due. John Oliva can take a vocal line and make it way more interesting just by being John Oliva. Like, he can add his kind of growliness to it. He can just the way that he modulates his voice and chooses his notes, I think make songs more interesting than they'd be otherwise. And I think this is one of those songs too. But I think now we've had like 2 nice songs in a row that I think just represent a little bit more of what people were looking for in a Savatage album in 1986.
I agree with that. When we get to track number 7, Lady in Disguise, I forgot about this tune completely. It was like I was listening to it for the first time. I'm going to start with a question for you. Is this the first time where Savatage was starting to give those Broadway vibes? Like, in a sense, this was something that could have almost been on Streets or something on one of the concept albums in the 90s. There was something about this song that was not raw. It wasn't mixed like a later album, but they have those Broadway adjacent vibes to it. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And I didn't even think of that, and you're spot on. If you go back and listen to the demo version of this track that's on the Sirens album, this was a song that was completely retooled for Fight for the Rock, whereas Out on the Streets and Crying for Love are pretty much the same as like the, conceptually, it probably softened a little bit, but they completely changed the song up for Fight for the Rock. And I love that intro, instead of like having some goofy ass like Halloween keyboard intro, it has like a sense of urgency to it, which is great. And this was a song I assumed I didn't really like that much either, and this one really grew on me too. It's a little bit, I think, more in that, kind of more mellow overall kind of feeling from tracks like 2, 3, and 4. But I think this is easily the best out of those 4 tracks up to this point. This is where Savatage does something a little bit softer, but it also maintains the power and the just, it has like you listen to it and it has an effect on you. You remember it. It has a memorable chorus. The keyboards, I think, are used well in this song. This is, I think, an underappreciated Savatage song.
I agree, and I think it's one of the 2 or 3 most unanticipated songs that I enjoyed, if that makes sense. Like I really didn't have any recollection, and then I was like, "This is a really good song." But perhaps the biggest surprise was the next track, "She's Only Rock and Roll." This was another one that's kind of buried on the back half of the album, and in certain ways, yeah, it's cheesy, but it's really good. This song has a real vintage Savatage feel, especially at the beginning. And again, John Oliva's vocals on this track have more of an edge. I love the guitars. I love the verses. And although it has a real 80s feel that sounds a little bit dated, I think it's a great song. The lyrics are cheesy, but it's probably a top 3 song on the album for me. There was something just so catchy and timely about this track. Curious to see if you liked it as much as I did.
I don't think that I did. Certainly not a bad song. You seem to really like it. I'm glad to hear that. It sounds a little bit derivative to me. It's solid, don't get me wrong. And I think this probably had the best chance of being the radio hit, I think, from the album. There's something very comforting about it, I think.
Bouncy, but easy to digest.
Yeah, I just think that as far as songwriting goes, I think that Edge of Midnight and Fight for the Rock are better songs. So this is solid. I think it was another, again, pleasant surprise of a song that I didn't really remember that well, to be honest. And so, yeah, I think if you kind of spread out some of these songs or maybe pull out some better demo options from Sirens and the Dungeons Are Calling recordings, you maybe have a better album. Maybe Paul O'Neill produces it. Maybe it's remembered better. Part of the problem too is that, the members of the band like absolutely hated recording it. So like you have the members of the band like constantly saying that the album sucks. So like I think that also gets into people's heads. They're like, well, the band hated it, so it must be bad. I mean, I was guilty of that too. But yeah, solid song. But then like a weird like another cover like placed at the as the penultimate track. I'm almost wondering if Day After Day was a better choice to play right before the final track, just because I think that it's a better song. I was never familiar with the band Free that they covered. Apparently this is one of their best known songs. The band featured Paul Rogers on vocals and also had Paul Kossoff, Andy Fraser, and Simon Kirke. They were another UK band, much like the Badfinger that was for Day After Day, but just such an odd choice. Like, how many bands can you think of that the second to last song on an album is a cover of like of a not that, I mean, I don't know, maybe it was a well-known song. I don't remember it.
I've never heard the original. I'm not going to lie.
It's an all right song, but
it's not bad. It's just another cover. Like, I don't know. It's almost like the label was forcing them to put an album out. They may have been strapped for material and they just kind of threw this on there. That's why they're reworking old songs from Sirens and covers and that. I'll say this. The bass, for the first time on possibly the entire album, is a lot more prominent on this song. And it has this bouncy quality to it. Again, I actually like the cadence, but it feels like a B-side. It doesn't feel like Savatage. It feels like John Oliva and the band are covering a song, and that's fine, but I don't need it on the album proper. It was like the band was having an identity crisis, and this, I think, is a perfect example.
Well, it sounds more like the label was having an identity crisis and the band was getting dragged down with it. I will say there's one part of the song I quite like, and it's about 1:45 in, and it's this bridge where it kind of just like quiets down, and again, John Oliva kind of breathes life into it. It's a kind of a cool part of the song and has a uniqueness to it, whereas the rest of the song I think feels a little bit trite and derivative, which are adjectives I feel like I've used way too many times on this episode so far. And I will say, like, throughout the album, this song included, you have that unmistakable tone of Chris Oliva's guitar. And so I think that automatically, like, gives an extra point at least to the album, because Chris Oliva is just a part of it and John Oliva is a part of it.
It's you're talking about, and I'm not just saying this as a fanboy, although I know it's going to come off that way. You're talking about one of the greatest songwriters that's ever lived, and you're talking about one of the greatest guitar players that's ever lived. And I'm not being, I mean, again, a lot of this is subjective, but the band has come out with so many good songs and reinvented themselves so many times, not least of which on this album. They're magic. It is a magic pairing. And when you add in the third musketeer and Paul O'Neill later on, that's why they are one of, if not my favorite band, right? Like they're a top 3 band for me. And even this album, which I struggle with in parts, my score may surprise you because I don't hate it, even though I'm being hypercritical.
100% agreed. And I'll tell you something funny I noticed. My favorite songs on this album, some of them, and some of the heaviest songs in this album are the ones that were co-written by somebody other than the Oliva brothers.
Like the last
Well,
track.
Fight for the Rock and Edge of Midnight and Hide were all co-written by Dr. Killdrums himself. And this last track, Red Light Paradise, which pretty much has to be both of our songs of the week because we're out of songs, was co-written by newcomer of the band Johnny Lee Middleton. All the other tracks are either covers or were written by John by himself or John and Chris together. So why don't I leave it to you to intro this last track, Red Light Paradise. It sounds like the band may have at least bookended this album quite well.
You took the word right out of my mouth, bookend. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this track. Then we'll give it a listen, and I'll let you take it home with why you selected it. But the reality is this. Both the title track and Red Light Paradise has that darker vibe to it, which is a staple of that early Savatage sound in the 80s. It sounds very mid-80s, but the verses are fantastic. The chorus is catchy. I think it's Oliva's best performance on the album vocally. And even the solos are fantastic. This is the reason I chose Red Light Paradise is because it is by far the most complete song on the album. There's nothing about it that's bad. And if I was to see Savatage live and they played this song live, it would fit in with the rest of the set list regardless of what they played because this is Savatage. This is a Savatage tune. And it doesn't get the love that it deserves because it's on their worst album. I mean, let's call it for what it is. This is demonstrably their worst album. I'm not saying it's a bad album. It's their worst album. And as a result, people don't talk about the album and they don't talk about this song. But it's really good and it's wildly underrated. I want to give it a listen and then I want to come back and hear your thoughts on Red Light Paradise. I want to give you the floor, and I want to hear you comment on Red Light Paradise, hookers, whatever it really comes to mind. I want to hear it from you. Your thoughts on this final track.
I have a 20
or the subject matter.
I have a 20 minute dissertation written about prostitution and why it should be legal, and it's because of this song that made me believe. The opening lyrics to this song are so epic. You long for the touch of the metal man, but on nights like this, any man would do. Oh, John, you son of a bitch. I love you. I have always, and I forgot how this song got on my radar while the rest of the album stayed off of it, but this has always been one of my favorite Savatage songs. And there were probably people when they listened to our episode on our like ultimate Savatage set list that this was on mine. And they were probably like, what the hell is he talking about? I think I was trying to at least have one song from every album, although in retrospect, I cannot remember if I actually used any songs from Sirens. That said, like, I would want this. It wouldn't just be like I'm pleasantly surprised or I marked out because it's a rare song. I would want this on a set list, especially with John Oliva as part of it. This is one of my favorite John Oliva era Savatage songs. It should have been on Hall of the Mountain King. They just wrote it a year too early. It's outstanding. I think it's by far the best song on the album. It has everything you would want out of Savatage at this point in time. There's no keyboards, at least as far as I can tell. It's just a straight up, I mean, it's kind of, it's in that vein of power metal, although I don't think anyone really considers Savatage a traditional power metal band, but this is just an outstanding song. And it's so it's so weird following like the previous three songs, Lady in Disguise, She's Only Rock and Roll, Wishing Well, and then this. It's just it's such a weird album. It's the weirdest Savatage album ever.
I mentioned this off air, but I think it's worth repeating. The bookends, as you coined the phrase, on this album are interesting because it's like after you listen to this, if you're a tried and true old Savatage fan, and you listen to Red Light Paradise, you're like, they still got it. This may have been different. Maybe you think it sucks. I don't know. But I'm going to get that next album because they still have the ability to write that kick-ass song. And so I think they could not have picked a better song to close this album out with.
It makes me wonder if they had gone the Dungeons Are Calling route and just picked like the 5 or 6 best tracks from these recordings and released it as an EP. I wonder if people would remember it differently.
100%, because it has, again, there are shades of Power of the Night. There's shades of Hall of the Mountain King here. It's just, I don't even want to say watered down with other stuff. It's just not cohesive. That is the word of the day, cohesive. Every song in and of themselves with a proper mix would be very, very good to great, maybe even superb like this last track. But when you throw it all together, it just takes the listener on this roller coaster ride, but not in a good way. It's not like an adventure ride. It's like it's zigging, it's zagging, and I'm getting sick, and I ate too many corn dogs. Like, that's what's happening.
There's 2 parts of the album that I think there's some sense of flow. And it's tracks 2 through 4, Out on the Streets, Crying for Love, Day After Day, but not for the right reason. It's too soft. It's too mellow. It's too radio friendly and poppy right after you like the first track where you want things to kind of maintain that punchiness. And then I also think Edge of Midnight, Hide, and Lady in Disguise, tracks 5, 6, and 7 also flow nicely because I feel like they all 3 utilize the keyboards. They feel like Savatage songs. But like, again, it's like these chunks of songs that then at the end, I feel like the last 3 tracks all sound totally different from one another. It's just a very, very strange album, but like, honestly, this is one of the most fun discussions I think we've ever had of any album. And it's usually these weird ass albums like Falling into Infinity and Chameleon, and albums that people, or critics generally crap on, usually make for the most fun discussion because there's always nuggets of gold hidden in that pile of crap. You just have to be willing to dig through it and
polish it.
Yeah, and honestly, like, I'm being very facetious because I don't think this album is a pile of crap. It's just that, like, I'm looking at the track list of Hall of the Mountain King, which is the album that would come out 1 year later. 24 Hours Ago, Beyond the Doors of the Dark, Legions, Strange Wings, Hall of the Mountain King, The Price You Pay, White Witch, Last Dawn, Devastation. it's just a one banger after the other.
Can we talk about that now? Are we ready? Should we just start talking? Should we just go right into it?
I mean, it's basically like if they had written Fight for the Rock, Edge of Midnight, Red Light Paradise, and then 7 other songs of that caliber, Fight for the Rock would be remembered as good as Power of the Night. It's just that's not the direction the band would go. And circling back to what Charlie said, it's absolutely true that this album was the catalyst for what Savatage would become, because it was after this that they were like, okay, I think we need a new producer. Let's see who we can find. Oh, Paul O'Neill, not future Yankee Paul O'Neill, but wonderful, worked with Aerosmith record producer Paul O'Neill. And immediately there are results, like I just said, with Hall of the Mountain.
Yet they hit a home run either way.
Yeah. And then they would go on to, in so many ways, go from being the Savatage you heard on Sirens and Power of the Night and become what eventually is Trans-Siberian Orchestra in so many ways. Because when you listen to Streets and you listen to Handful of Rain and Dead Winter Dead and Wake of Magellan and Poets of Madmen, you can see so much of that marriage of Oliva and O'Neill. That was just the dream team. Even after Chris passed, they kept creating this fantastic music. I'll
tell you an aside. All of a sudden, the next thing up in the queue was 24 hours ago, and so I just started listening to it. Oh my God! I mean, I haven't listened to Hall of the Mountain King. I couldn't tell you the last time. I've played this album so much, so obviously I remember every one of these songs. I can't wait to talk about it just because I have so many memories of how I first heard this particular song, etc. Oh my God!
Talk about a
discussion.
Talk about an album with a hard to choose song of the week. There's like 4 or 5, possibilities just from looking at the track list and not even listening to the album itself. So part of the reason why I agree with you that it was a good idea to kind of hold off, because I feel like there's at least 2 more absolute classic Savatage albums in Hall of the Mountain King and Wake of Magellan, and 3 very good albums in Poets and Madmen, Sirens, and Power of the Night. And plus the Sirens discussion can also include all those Dungeons Are Calling tracks, which is some good stuff on those on that EP as well. So as always, we can always be incredibly verbose when it comes to this band. They're one of our first loves in metal. One of probably the first band after like the Monkees and Green Day that I was like absolutely obsessed with. Interesting Company, those 3 bands. Probably Carrie Gordon's probably the only person I know who would be like, yeah, I could get on board with all 3 of those. Honestly, I am expecting your score to surprise me. My score surprised me. I'm giving this a 7.5. I think this is a wildly underrated album. There's some really good stuff on here. I think the stuff that is weird and drags the score down a little bit and is an odd fit is still good songs. It's just that, like I've said before, like when a Nightwish album is not in your top 3 at the end of the year, it's automatically a disappointment. And when a Savatage album, to me, doesn't score a 9 or above, it's not good. It's not considered up to their standard. And so that's why I think this album is generally underappreciated, or not underappreciated. Underappreciated, just because I think that, it just gets put in that bin, as Keith would say, with Mahogany Rush in the delete bin of life. It's that's what happens. And I feel like we said the same thing about, Falling into Infinity and Chameleon. There's a lot of good stuff going on there. It's just your word cohesion. Chameleon especially had 0. That's part of the problem. And every band's got to have that one album that people, except for Amorphous apparently, where people are like, oh, that was their one shit album. But man, if you haven't listened to this album in a while, go back and listen to it. I'm guessing you did not rank this lower than a 7.
I did, but
Boo.
not for the reasons you think. So it's a 6.5, but I'm going to, which by the way, is above average. It is not a bad album. The reason I ding it is for a few reasons. A, I think the mix is terrible. I don't like the way it sounds. 2, there's elements of songs which just take me out of the moment, even on some of the mediocre tracks on the album. And the listening experience is just so jarring because of the way that the songs are structured and the 3 ballads at the front and stuff like that, each of those deserve a demerit to some end. And I just don't think it's a perfect album to begin with. But I enjoy it much more than I did for those 3 or 4 listens that I've had since 1997 or whenever I heard it for the first time. So the score is a really good score for an album that is not Gutter Ballet or Streets or something like that. But this was probably one of the most fun weeks of listening, getting ready for an album that I've had in the 300 episodes almost that we've done for the podcast. So really, really interesting stuff there.
I'm kind of sad that it's over because that was just. I knew it was going to be a fun discussion, but this exceeded my expectations wildly.
I always said to you, I think that there's certain albums that at some point, and we're not there yet, that we should go back to that we've done to see if we are even consistent with ourselves. Maybe not in long form. Maybe it speaks to a bonus episode. I think that would be a cool Patreon bonus episode. We can pick one or two, and this may be one of those albums we come back to in 5 years.
I have one planned, which is called "Why Did Justin Not Give Angels Cry a 10?" So we'll be definitely.
I don't know what I was thinking. I think we were so early that I hadn't really set the rubric for what a 10 was. So I will fall on the sword there. No pun.
Yeah, we'll go back to that. I remember thinking at the time, I was like, if Angels Cry is a 9, does anything get a 10?
Right, exactly.
I should say it was a 9.5. 9.5.
But I still think I made a mistake there. I mean, whatever. Yeah. That's a discussion for another day.
You know, the rating changes depending on your mood, the week, like how your week is going. Sometimes it's hard to remove the human element from
part of the music listening experience.
And the nostalgia is part of it too. Like I will say I have zero nostalgia for Fight for the Rock other than the story I told, buying it at Sam Goody. So interesting, but I think that if I were to have a conversation with John Oliva after all these years, I would say maybe you shouldn't be so hard on yourself for Fight for the Rock, because there's some gems in there, and like I said, there's stuff on here I would not be sad to hear live. And Edge of Midnight was really my I should have made it my song of the week. I thought maybe you weren't going to pick Red Light Paradise.
What did you think? You had mentioned you thought you knew what I would choose. What did you think?
I thought it was going to be Edge of Midnight, honestly, just because it took me by surprise. I thought it might have taken you by surprise as well. But yeah, it's interesting that the tracks are kind of my 3 favorite tracks are the first track, the last track, and one of the tracks that are right in the middle. And then there's a lot of filler, so to speak, in between. So I could go on for hours about this band. I'll cut myself short. I'm going to do something that we don't usually do, and that's I'm going to lead with a news item, and because it's something that I'm sure I'm going to mention because we haven't talked about it yet. But the revolving door of vocalists continues, and this one really came as a shock to me and to a lot of people. And that was the announcement that Nora Luimo is leaving Battle Beast. And it seemed like a very amicable split. The band released a video of all together announcing it. Nora wants to go on and focus on her solo career. I mean, Battle Beast definitely, you talk about Sabaton and those bands that just are touring nonstop, it seems like, and are just always working. And I feel like Battle Beast is definitely that kind of band. Marina Lataraka, who I have mentioned many times on this podcast, I'm a big fan of her work. She's in Exit Eden. She was the singer for Phantom Elite. She's worked with former podcast alum. I'm sorry, for After Forever.
Sanders
yes. Sanders Gomans, who I saw him send his best to her and be like, "You're going to do great." It's I think that's a tough pair of shoes to fill, or a pair of boots with lifts in them. I mean, Nora is a force of nature. She is just the visuals of the outfit and the hair and the quality of the vocals and her. I never really appreciate it until I saw them at Prague Power from the front of the stage and watched her movements and how like she's like a well-oiled machine on stage. And it's a hard act to follow. I'm going to be very open-minded to it, but I mean, I think I've seen a lot of people just outright be like, Nora is Battle Beast. But we've seen in the past that is not always the case, and bands can surprise you. I saw a really interesting article from an overseas publication that was about Tommy from Majestica, and basically was saying that like the reason he had left Sabaton was because he wasn't able to do some of the things that he wanted to do as a musician. He wanted to build his YouTube channel, which he has, and he wanted to do more Majestica stuff, and he wanted to focus on things that were his creations and not just be a hired gun, so to speak, because he's an outstanding guitar player and he fit in great with Sabaton, but he wanted to do his own thing. And I think that's where Nora is at here. I'm super excited to kind of hear what the band sounds like with Marina in the fold. They're one of my favorite bands, so like I can't say that I'm not disappointed, but I was really glad to see somebody come in who I really respect and I think is a really good singer. And I think that it was smart that she's not like a clone and is somebody that's going to bring their own style and vibe. So I'm super interested to see what happened, but I am very surprised because I felt like the band was really starting to build a lot of momentum as it was constructed.
Yeah, they seem to be just getting more and more popular, playing bigger and bigger rooms, selling more and more albums. So the timing was somewhat interesting, but it sounds like, who knows what the future holds. They're leaving on good terms. I'm intrigued by the replacement, although I agree that there's big shoes to fill. I'll just reserve judgment. I want to see where it goes, and I'm curious to see them live because they are a very good live band. And although I would think you're a bigger fan than I am, I did really enjoy the new album a lot. I'll be talking about that at some point in the future, I'm sure.
We'll
see where it goes.
I have a theory, actually, a Battle Beast theory. It's not quite
want to share it, or
not quite as juicy as my Frozen Crown theory, but so like after the break between Battle Beast and Beast in Black, so to speak, it was Anton Kabanen who left Battle Beast to start Beast in Black, and he was the primary songwriter for Battle Beast when he left, and so I think there were a lot of questions as to like, how's this band going to fare without him? And I got into the band with their first album without him, which was Bringer of Pain, which I thought was outstanding. And then No More Hollywood Endings came out, and I thought that one was a little bit on the disappointing side because I felt like there were some songs on there that felt a little bit not Battle Beast, like a little bit softer, even like a little bit of a kind of a country vibe almost. And then
they were definitely pushing boundaries with that.
And then Circus of Doom comes out in 2022, and then the album that came out this year, Steelbound. Those two albums, I just felt like they kind of went back to what they were doing with Bringer of Pain. And I'm wondering if No More Hollywood Endings was Nora using more of her creative outlet, and it just didn't work in the confines of the band, and so they kind of abandoned it. it's just, I literally, based on nothing, I just thought that there were some really interesting song choices on No More Hollywood Endings. I think it's, of the 4 albums they've done since Anton left, it's definitely the outlier, I think, of the 4. So that's my weird Battle Beast theory.
Listen, I like it. Only time will tell. It's interesting that they would do it on the heels of the album. I have a feeling they'll be touring quite a bit, as they have been, to your point, incessantly. I think
they already have tour dates scheduled with Marina in tow. So I'm there for it. Let's see how that goes. The band's been doing live streams of their shows, which is really cool. Like, and because of the time difference, I'm usually like in the middle of a work day, and I pop onto Facebook and like, hey, there's a live stream of a Battle Beast concert, so I just pop it on and listen to it while I'm working. And they're a band that, man, like, even without post-production, they sound so good. They've really found their stride. So hopefully they can keep it going with Marina as their new vocalist. So,
well, we will certainly see. Time will tell. I'm actually going to cut it there just because we are going long on this, as we often do when we talk about Savatage, which is great. But I'm glad you brought up the Battle Beast news. It was certainly on my list of things to talk about. Our next album that we are covering is by request as we get into January and 2026. And I will say this, it is a band that I had heard of, but I had never heard before. And after listening to the album once so far in preparation for the next episode, it is completely different from what I expected, maybe in the best way possible. The band is Finnish sensation Sentenced. The album, The Cold White Light, from May of 2002. So almost 25 years on this one. Have you ever heard this band?
Don't ask me why. I'm going to have to talk to Mike, because I think he's the reason why I know the song Cross My Heart and Hope to Die, like, really well for some reason, and don't know any other songs by this band, period. And that song happens to be on the album we're discussing, so it should be an interesting conversation. I agree with you, not what I was expecting. I was expecting more, I think I was expecting like more like soil work, and got more typo negative.
Exactly. Early soil work too, at that, like the really heavy stuff. And very late era typo negative. So very interesting stuff. I look forward to talking about that and more in the weeks ahead. And of course, our best of 2025, which is on its way as well. This was a fun one. Thanks to everyone for listening. Any parting thoughts before we go off and get ready for the new year?
No, but I may pick Hall of the Mountain King as my next album, which is, at the rate we're going, it might not be until like early February, because we have so many things planned for the last handful of episodes in the first 300 episodes of this podcast's existence. But that's just timing for you. I don't know if I'm going to be able to wait until December to do another Savatage album. So we'll see. Maybe if an anniversary lines up or whatever, we'll see. We'll see. But this was a blast. I always really look forward to these Savatage episodes, which is why I think we space them out the way that we do, so as not to burn through them all. But this was a real treat, and we hope you enjoyed a little early release as our Christmas present to everybody out there. So Merry Christmas to all. Happy New Year if you don't hear from us before then. And we chug along towards episode 300.